Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, July the 12th, 2024. So today there is an opposition aspect between Venus and Pluto. I have already considered what it means for Venus to be opposition Pluto in terms of natal charts, and in my video, I think for this week, the sort of a week ahead video, I looked at some people who had Venus opposition Pluto. What I didn't look at, though, was events with Venus opposition Pluto. And so that's what I wanted to do today. Just look, at a few events. For example, Hitler came to power with Venus opposition Pluto. The Battle of the Bulge started as Venus made an opposition to Pluto. And as far as what's going on now, well, I mean, in the UK, the big news story was about these crossbow killings. So there was a BBC journalist and his wife and two of his daughters were killed by someone with a crossbow, and it seemed that the killer had a relationship with one of the daughters and it had broken up, and he went crazy. Well, not really crazy. I mean, he did it, the whole thing was done in a very deliberate kind of way. He went into their home, he tied his victims up apparently and killed them with a crossbow. And so I thought I would look at the event, what I know about the event. All I know is really the time of it, that it happened roughly, with the view, well, okay, it happened in a run-up to a Venus opposition Pluto, so was Venus and Pluto involved, or was it something else? Was it the fact that Uranus is starting to approach the conjunction of Algol, and so perhaps with Uranus approaching the conjunction of Algol, we can just, in general, expect kind of horrific things to be happening, horrific single events. So, I mean, that is a possibility. I'm not actually saying that I find very much in a chart of these murders, but as it's a current event in the UK, I thought I'd look at it anyway, just to see what was happening at that time. But before I consider Venus opposition Pluto, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, July the 12th, 2024. So here is the chart for today. I mean, I've got some pictures in the thumbnail. Thumbnail is, of course, that's Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator. I suppose that's a reminder that Hitler came to power on January the 30th, 1933, when Venus was opposition Pluto. That is a statue which I think is the rape of Persephone, which, of course, that was Pluto. Pluto dragged Persephone down into the underworld, or certainly for 6 months of the year. And I suppose you could say that is a Venus opposition Pluto concept. Venus being Persephone, and Pluto, Pluto being Pluto. Well, so that's why I put that statue there. And bottom right, that's just a tank. I think that picture was taken during the Battle of the Bulge. Okay, so the moon has now moved into Libra. So there it is, 6 Libra, and it's very close to the south node. It is also making a trine to Jupiter, and with that the moon in Libra, it's different from a moon in Virgo. So we have had moon in Virgo over the last couple of days. So with moon in Libra, things are perhaps a little easier. Perhaps there's less focus on detail, at least material detail. Maybe we're thinking more about social detail with moon in Libra. Moon in Libra often likes to respond to the social world. It's quite a civilized placement, Moon in Libra. Civilized perhaps in terms of not wanting to get involved in messy details. Leave the messy details for later, sweep things under the carpet. Just what really matters is just everything being smooth and calm, and we don't want to make waves. So that is one approach to that moon opposition. Sorry, that moon in Libra. And there is actually a sort of a grand trine feel to what's happening today, because the moon is it's applying to a trine of Jupiter, and it's separating from a trine to Pluto. So there's a sort of a triangular relationship there between Moon, Jupiter, and Pluto. And perhaps at some level this Jupiter trine Pluto is sort of coming back into focus. So we had this Jupiter opposite. So we had this Jupiter trine Pluto sort of at the beginning of when was it happening? Sort of beginning of June, about a month ago. So it's really separating. It's about nearly 10 degrees apart. But the moon sort of brings it back into focus, and the moon is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So perhaps again, some of us are going to feel that it is a time when we need to look at what we're doing, asking ourselves, is it good enough? And perhaps, if necessary, putting in a little more effort. Because with Jupiter-Pluto, self-improvement is often a big theme. And the moon is applying to a trine to Jupiter. Now, that trine to Jupiter is fortunate, and I don't think it really matters where you are in the world with that trine to Jupiter. Okay, you could say that the moon trine Jupiter is going to affect those of you in the Americas more than the rest of the world, but on the other hand, everyone's going to feel it. The point is, the moon is applying to that trine to Jupiter. It's getting stronger. So, sure, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, it might not actually be until tomorrow that the trine between the moon trine Jupiter happens. Still, you can feel it getting stronger. And so moon trine Jupiter, I would have said on balance, is pretty fortunate. It allows things to happen. It allows us to be optimistic, and things are perhaps going to be relatively easy. So we want things to happen. We put in maybe minimal effort. We don't have to put in too much effort for things to go our way. So I think for all of us, that moon trine Jupiter is fortunate, though we should not forget that the moon is now in the same sign as the south node. And so it's perhaps time to monitor our feelings, or even our lack of feelings, and to ask ourselves, are we responding in the right way? So if we respond to something in a way that is kind of grounded in the past. So feelings from the past may be expressed in the present, and those feelings might not be appropriate. And because it's in an air sign, it may even be a lack of feelings in the past. So if in the past we'd responded to something in a fairly unemotional way, and we haven't really engaged in our feelings, and we're tempted to respond in the same way, that might not be appropriate. But still, I think the moon in Libra, even if it is moving towards a conjunction of a south node, it's fortunate. I think it's good news overall. And at the same time, we have got Mercury making a sesquiquadrate to Neptune. So there's Mercury at 15 Leo, and there is Neptune at, where's Neptune gone? Neptune is at 2954 Pisces. So Mercury is 135 degrees from the Aries point. So you've got Mercury aspecting the Aries point, and it's hitting Neptune. And so with Mercury sesquiquadrate Neptune, I suppose we might be so into ourselves and what we are trying to do and what we're trying to achieve that maybe we make some mistakes. We can't be so self-obsessed that we can't understand the underlying reality. And perhaps Mercury in Leo is just a little bit too positive, a little bit too self-focused, so much so that we miss things. And just because we miss things doesn't mean they're not important. And there may be emotional realities going on that we can't see, we don't want to see, but they still matter, and perhaps most importantly, they are still influencing us. So we may actually think we're in control, but actually we may not be in control. And another aspect going on is Venus opposition Pluto. I mean, that's why I wanted to talk about Venus opposition Pluto as my main theme today, but not from a sort of individual perspective. I wanted to look at it more in terms of events. But yeah, Venus is opposition Pluto. Venus is at around 1 degree Leo. Pluto is at around 1 degree Aquarius. So those two planets are in fixed signs. Okay, it's not like it's Venus in Scorpio. So it's not super obsessed, but still we could hang on to things. Venus in Leo is quite proud, and Venus doesn't want to let go. So some people could be very obsessed about themselves and with what they look like. There could be a certain amount of physical perfectionism with Venus opposition Pluto. And it may, in extreme situations, be a case where we just can't be good enough. We try our hardest to look our best, but it doesn't work. It's still not quite good enough, and we get obsessed. So that is one way it can operate. Plus, I suppose Venus opposition Pluto can be obsession with another person. We just can't get them out of our mind. That could be about love, it could be about hate, it could be both. It could just be general possessiveness, or an obsession with an obsession with a relationship, and an obsession with the power underlying that relationship. Perhaps feeling that we don't have enough power, someone else has too much power. So that's Venus opposition Pluto. Though I suppose I should emphasize that it's not going to hang around for too long. Venus is a fast-moving planet. Venus will move away from that opposition to Pluto quite quickly. Looking at the heliocentric picture, I'm not too sure what's going on heliocentrically, but here it is. So what we have today is Earth is square Chiron. So remember, this is from a perspective of the Sun. You put the Sun at the center of the solar system, and with Earth square Chiron, there is a challenge there, and it might be the challenge to do something differently, to demonstrate our individuality. Or it could be just an awareness that something is wrong, perhaps that someone is hurting, and we need to do something about it, or perhaps we're angry about it. Maybe there's nothing we can do about it. Maybe we're looking at pain on the other side of the world, a wound on the other side of the world, and there's not much we can do, or at least that's how it feels. So if we feel another person's wound, and it perhaps relates to our own wound, and it may not be just another person, it may be a group of people, it's perhaps going to have an impact on us. Also, Venus is making a trine to Mars. There's Venus in Leo making a trine to Mars in Aries. Just remember, these are heliocentric positions, not geocentric positions. So with Venus trine Mars, Venus is quite a fast-moving aspect. I suppose that Venus trine Mars is going to be around a bit tomorrow, but it's today and tomorrow. With Venus trine Mars, there's just going to be a general Venus-Mars feel to it. It is about attractiveness. It's about being seductive, being able to have an influence. Perhaps some of us can actually use that Venus trine Mars. It can get attention. People want to give someone attention, and it's about attractiveness. It's about society's concern with attractiveness, and perhaps sexuality and sex appeal with Venus trine Mars. I mean, it is quite a collective aspect. It's not necessarily an individual aspect, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't feel it as individuals. And so perhaps if one wants to be attractive, if one wants to get attention, if one wants to be charismatic, that Venus trine Mars may actually be quite useful. And we can perhaps tie that in with Mercury square Pluto. Now that Mercury square Pluto, Mercury in Scorpio square Pluto, is just about running out of steam. It's getting a bit wide, but I suppose it's still there just about. So we might feel the tail end of that Mercury square Pluto, and that Mercury square Pluto is about influence, and it's about trying to get people to see things our way, or perhaps other people trying to get us to see things their way. Depends which side of the power equation we're on. But it is about influence and perhaps using words to try to control people's minds. And in that sense, it kind of links in with the Venus trine Mars. Influence, attractiveness, manipulation. It's all there. But just remember, it's the heliocentric picture. It's not necessarily personal. It's just saying something about the society in which we're living right now. Turning to the 12 signs, I'm now going to switch coordinate systems and do my forecasts for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, July the 12th, 2024. Aries, you do realize that other people matter and that you're not alone. And I think that your focus has, to an extent, changed. You were perhaps focusing a lot recently on just annoying details that were kind of holding you back and just preventing you from fully being yourself, or at least that's how it seemed. Though hopefully, Aries, you were able to do some good work over the last couple of days, and there were sort of some material details that really did need to be sorted out. But things have changed now because of the moon moving into Libra and the fact that you are becoming more responsive to your social environment. And actually, I think you can actually benefit a great deal from other people with the moon moving through Libra, especially as the moon makes a trine to Pluto. It's making a trine to Jupiter, and in fact the moon is making a sextile to Venus. So if you make the effort to consider other people, you can really benefit from them. And perhaps it's a time when you can be a little more relaxed. You don't have to make decisions. You don't have to be the one who is always trying to make things happen. I mean, it gets a bit exhausting being an Aries after a certain point. You know, you can just perhaps take a back seat, see where other people want things to go, and not interfere. Okay, I understand that you do sometimes have to interfere if things are really going wrong, but if a car in which you're in the back seat is about to run off a cliff, sure, you've got to do something. But in most cases, you can just let things run at their own pace and don't allow yourself to just get too worried about what's going on. You know, there is a certain tendency, I suppose, for Aries for your feelings to sort of say, no, stop what you're doing, just don't do it. Just holding things back on the basis of some kind of unconscious worry. But I wouldn't get involved in that. I would just be more relaxed, and also take advantage of the fact that Venus is firstly making a sextile to the moon, as I've just said. So moon sextile Venus it's a very nice aspect, and it allows you to perhaps just relax and enjoy other people's company, and perhaps to recognize that some people are actually on the same wavelength as you. This hasn't recently been immediately obvious, but in fact it is the case. You're not alone. Your interests are not unique. There are certainly people who share your interests, and it's perhaps a time to understand their view, not interfere, don't interrupt people. Just listen to what they've got to say, and don't feel that your power is being usurped. You are powerful. You can just be yourself, and I think that you're helped that from a heliocentric view. Remember, heliocentric view, not a geocentric view. We have got a trine between Venus and Mars. So Mars is your ruler. With this heliocentric trine between Venus and Mars, you can be quietly charismatic. People are going to like you. You're not going to do anything that rocks the boat too badly, and you get attention without having to say anything or do anything. So overall, Aries, I think that it can be quite a relaxing day, so do enjoy it. I understand, of course, that there is a conjunction between Mars and Uranus building up. This conjunction, it's getting closer and closer, isn't it? Just 4 days left. But it's not there yet. Okay, sure, Mars is approaching the fixed star Algol, but again, it's not quite there yet. Yeah, I think you can see that the tension is building up, but I don't think you need to worry about it right now. I think that you need to certainly keep an eye on what's going on, but I suspect that today, especially with the moon being in Libra, you can just relax and just not feel that you have to worry too much about the short-term future. Now, a couple of days' time, maybe you'll have to be more alert, but today, I don't think so. Taurus. Venus is opposition Pluto, and this Venus opposition Pluto is arguably the main aspect for today. It's certainly an aspect I'm going to be talking about in some detail later on in this video. And with this Venus opposition Pluto, I think that you're going to be affected by it because Venus is your ruler. And I think that issues of power could be important. Venus kind of represents you. Venus in Leo represents you. That's you trying to be in control, trying to be in an environment where you understand everything. And also, I think it's actually quite important that you get a certain amount of attention and recognition, but not in an over-the-top way. What you'd really like is people you trust, people you like, maybe members of your family, to give you the attention you feel you deserve, but you don't really want to go out into the world to find recognition. That's not what you're looking for. And you just want to find a secure space for yourself and just to be able to enjoy that space. But that Venus opposition Pluto is a little bit challenging. There are things going on out there which you can't entirely ignore, and you may have to pay attention to them, and you may have to think about how to respond. And I suppose it may become an issue of power. You don't want to get involved in issues of power, but you might find yourself getting involved in issues of power anyway because of that Venus opposition Pluto. Who is in control? And if you're in any hierarchical structure, especially if you are at a lower level in the structure from someone else, someone up there, you may feel that perhaps you're being taken for granted, or that someone is trying to throw their power around. So that might be your first concern. But I wouldn't get too upset about it. I mean, for a start, from a heliocentric view, Venus is trine your Mars. Sorry, Venus is trine Mars. So that Venus trine Mars does give you the ability to, I won't say fight back, but just the ability to assert yourself in a gentle way. So if you're feeling that you're losing control a bit, just a little bit of self-assertion, not very much self-assertion, is probably enough to deal with the situation. And if you want something to happen, you should be able to make it happen with that heliocentric Venus trine Mars. Now, from a psychological perspective, and this may not be appropriate in all cases, but with Venus opposition Pluto, you could say that the Pluto represents the mother, because in Western astrology, the 10th house tends to represent the mother. Okay, it depends on what system you're using, but sort of modern Western astrology does assign the 10th house to the mother. I'm not saying every Western astrologer takes that view. I think it's always a good idea not to have absolute cast iron rules. 10th house is always the mother, but Pluto is in Aquarius, which has a kind of a 10th house relationship to Taurus. So if your mother is still around, if you have connections with your mother, then your mother may be having an impact on you that is perhaps a little bit unexpected. Even if your mother is no longer alive, or you are completely estranged from your mother, the mother principle could be having an impact with Venus opposition Pluto. It may be that memories of your mother are going to be more important than usual, and the psychological impact of your mother may be having an impact. Impact. So don't ignore the mother concept. Perhaps if you happen to be a mother yourself, that Venus opposition Pluto may be having an impact also. There may be issues of power and control, and just generally what your mother was like. So that's a thought, but I mean, I don't want to push that mother image on you too hard, but just give it some consideration if you can. On another note, Taurus, I think you can do some useful work in a material sense, because there is a grand trine in air. So we've got the moon in Libra is trine Jupiter, and it's trine Pluto, and Jupiter is in a fairly financially orientated sector of your chart, and Pluto is in a part of the chart often connected with career and status, and the moon is in Libra. We can see some sort of organizational issues there. So in a material sense, I think there's actually a lot you can do in terms of making sure everything is just right. And you don't actually have to put a lot of energy into making things happen. You don't. You have a desire. You want things to happen in a particular way, or in a material sense, or perhaps in terms of your career or where you are in the hierarchy. You put a little bit of effort in, and things happen quickly, and you soon start to realize that you are having a real impact. It may not be a super dramatic impact, but it is nonetheless a real impact which you are going to be able to benefit from. Gemini. There's a grand trine in air signs, kind of. It's not a particularly exact grand trine in air signs, but it matters. And Gemini is an air sign. You've got Jupiter in Gemini, and the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, and the moon is also making a trine to Pluto. So what we kind of have is moon on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So with this grand trine in air signs, as I said, I understand it's a relatively weak grand trine, but as I said, I think you may still feel it. You can feel that things are working. Things are running relatively smoothly, and you don't really have to put too much effort into anything. Things just work. And I think that now you can really start to benefit from the fact that Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter is an expansive, optimistic sign. It's been in Gemini since I think the end of May, and perhaps you're now able to see what you can actually do. And that trine between the moon and Jupiter is particularly good. It really helps you to express yourself and to get in tune with your fundamental creativity. That's always important for a Gemini. And Geminis and creativity, well, they can sometimes actually have a difficult relationship with creativity, because perhaps Geminis think too much, and they're a little bit too questioning, and they can give up on things rather too quickly. That is a Gemini feature. Yeah, I'm speaking as a Gemini. You put a load of effort into something, and suddenly you just stop doing it. Sometimes you just stop doing it just before it's about to work. Just before your creative efforts start to bring a real dividend, you just get bored, you're not getting enough appreciation, and you just give up. But it's just terribly important now that you keep going. Moon trine Jupiter. It is coming together. And at the same time, don't be entirely complacent about your various creative endeavors. You might think you've got things 100% right, but it's not entirely 100% right. There's still some fine-tuning that needs to be done. And perhaps you need to have the courage to get criticism. So criticism is always a problem, perhaps if you're a Gemini, because, or perhaps for anyone else, but if you invite criticism because you need feedback, there's a danger that you overreact to that criticism. And you overreact to that criticism by you stop doing what you're doing. So, for example, you might spend a year writing a book, and you're very pleased with what you're doing, and you show it to someone, and they tell you it's garbage. That's it, it's gone. In 5 minutes, it's gone. 1 year, 1 year's work, 5 minutes of criticism, and you just give up on the entire project. That is a possibility. So you have to take a constructive approach to criticism. And you perhaps have to realize that if you are being criticized, you're being helped, but you might not see it like that. You may just see it as something completely existential, and you just give up. So somehow, Gemini, you have to be prepared to adjust what you're doing, to take criticism, even to court criticism, but not to be devastated by criticism. And that just can be very important right now. And that is because we've got the Moon conjunct South Node in Libra. Moon conjunct South Node is telling you can't just think about yourself. You can't think that your view is the only view and it is all wonderful. And so you have a challenge. You have to respond to that Moon conjunct South Node by actually going in the opposite direction, by starting to go into the North Node. And the North Node is about looking at the other, perhaps talking to your friends, getting their feedback, and being able to deal with that feedback and not be overwhelmed by it to the point where you just give up on something. So keep going with whatever you're involved in, but at the same time be ready to make some adjustments, even perhaps some quite substantial adjustments. And also remember that with the Moon on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, it's all about self-improvement. You haven't got it 100% right. Remember, I'm a Gemini. I'm talking to myself here as well. You haven't got it 100% right. There's always some changes that are required, and that's something that you shouldn't be afraid of. And also, Gemini, you need to be optimistic. Not just need to be optimistic. You can be optimistic. Today you can get a real sense of yourself and what you can do and what you can achieve, and actually getting feedback from other people can actually boost this sense of achievement and possibility. And so I do see that potentially as being really very fortunate. So don't be lazy today. Don't be tough on yourself, but accept that it's a good day where things are moving, and just understand that with a little bit of feedback from the outside world, things can be moving even quicker and they can have a higher chance of ultimate success. Cancer. You probably feel, Cancer, that you don't really want to be too closely involved with the world around you. I mean, you want to kind of know what's going on, but you don't want to be the center of attention. And you may feel that you just want to perhaps keep your own company, or just be with people who you trust. And I don't think that you're particularly in the mood for taking social risks. I think there's some danger, Cancer, that you're being a little too cautious here. I understand that you want stability, that you want to be able to ground yourself, and that is fine. But there are other things going on, and I don't think you want to stand still. I think that with the moon making a trine to Pluto and making a trine to Jupiter. I mean, it's sort of halfway between noon in New York. The moon is sort of halfway between a trine to Pluto and a trine to Jupiter. So we could say that the moon is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, and with the moon on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, don't be complacent, and you need to tell yourself that things could always be better, that things could always be moved to a new level. So whatever you're doing, I think it's probably important to work on yourself. I think with the moon applying to a sextile of Jupiter, a trine of Jupiter, you are relatively fortunate. And if you actually put some effort into something, whatever it might be, then I think you're going to get results. I think that is very likely, and the results will actually be easier than expected. But just don't completely ignore the outside world. Don't be afraid of the outside world. I don't think there are any dangers out there to be concerned about. One danger might be embarrassment or getting ignored. Don't worry about it. You have got something to contribute, and perhaps you're in a position where you can actually bring other people down to earth. So look at what impact you can have, and I do think that impact could actually be quite favourable. But if you were to spend today just at home, I think part of you would like to spend the day at home. I mean, I think that's what you'd like to do, and it seems to be the easiest approach. But I think if you were to do that, you might be narrowing your options. You have to give yourself as many options as possible, and you have to consider how other people can help you, and indeed how other people can be helped by you, and find a way of tuning into your own power, because you are actually in a very powerful position here. The moon is just separating from that trine to Pluto. You can make things happen. There is this grand trine, moon trine Jupiter, moon trine Pluto. You have a lot of, I won't say a lot of energy, but you have strong desires which are backed by strong feelings, and because of that you can just make things happen. You can almost will it that way, but you can't will it that way in an entirely supernatural and magical way. It's not quite like that. You do have to have some kind of interaction with the world, and that's a kind of interaction that you probably in the first instance don't really want to have. It seems like too much of an effort, but you do have to be linked up, and perhaps that's a key point today. You've got to be linked up. There's got to be a line of communication. It's got to be possible for you to contact other people. It's also got to be possible for the other people to contact you, because if you're not linked up and you close down all your links, whether they're real links like, I don't know, on a telephone or a network or a wireless network, or a link that is a psychic link, an emotional link, if you close down those links, then you become powerless. And that would be so unnecessary, because I think today can't say you can really make things happen. Leo, you're in, I think, quite a friendly mood, perhaps more friendly and more positive than you were feeling yesterday. Yesterday moon was in Virgo, but now moon is in Libra, and that means it's just much easier to interact, and you're just going to be aware of all the connections you have and all the ways in which you can actually utilize those connections. So it's just important that you make the effort, and you are helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. That moon trine Jupiter, moon in Libra, trine Jupiter in Gemini, is, I think, very sociable, and you'll just know what to say. And whatever you say, it will be right, it will be correct, and people will listen to you, and you don't have to try too hard. You don't have to get the words absolutely right. It's just enough to be coming from the right place, for having a sense of yourself and what you've got to offer, and things should run pretty smoothly. Though there is an opposition aspect between Venus and Pluto, and this opposition aspect does hit the main axis of your chart, because Venus is moving through early Leo, your sign, and it is opposition Pluto in Aquarius. So as it hits the main axis of your chart, this Venus-Pluto opposition, that might mean that when it comes to very close relationships, people you know really well, there could be a little bit of a past struggle. That's one possibility. I mean, Venus-Pluto oppositions can be about past struggles, wondering who has the power, who doesn't have the power, who's in control. So that's something for you to consider, but don't exaggerate the situation. You might just think that there is a power struggle, but in fact there may be no power struggle at all. Why that would happen, it's just because Pluto is in your opposite sign of Aquarius. And so if you've got Pluto in your opposite sign, particularly if it's opposition Venus, you could have imaginings. Pluto can be your imaginings about your loss of control, or making someone more significant than they actually are. So if you're spending time with someone, or you're very aware of someone's presence, you may project onto them all sorts of attributes, like control freak, dictator, whatever. You might project attributes that really don't exist, that are just not real. Another thing is Venus is moving through Leo, early Leo. And Venus in Leo might be about your need for attention and your need for recognition. I understand, you're a Leo, all things being equal, attention and recognition are important. But with Venus opposition Pluto, your desire for attention might be a little bit of a problem. Perhaps you'll feel that you're being ignored or discounted, or not given the recognition you deserve. Pluto can hide whatever it touches. And so you might feel that Venus, the planet of relationships, the way you relate to the world, is opposition Pluto. So other people not responding as you wanted, and perhaps you do feel a little bit hidden, and you may just get edgy because of this, and you may feel that you're being disrespected. I would suggest that you don't panic. Well, you do consider also that it may just be a figment of your imagination. Even if other people really are ignoring you and disrespecting you, I would perhaps suggest, at least for today, that you don't react to the situation. You say to yourself, well, this is about Venus opposition Pluto. The Venus opposition Pluto will eventually break up. I mean, it's exact today. By tomorrow, this opposition aspect is weakening. So perhaps you should regard any disrespect you get today as just being something that's passing. And tomorrow, I'm fairly confident the situation will have resolved and you'll be feeling a lot better about yourself. But let's not forget that, as I've already said, the moon is trine Jupiter. Maybe that's what you should be focusing on rather than Venus opposition Pluto. You know, with the right people, moon trine Jupiter, things can be great. You've got lots to say. People have got lots to offer. And, you know, provided you don't let things get too intense, maybe you shouldn't be hanging around with people who know you very well. You want things to be light, certainly in terms of your social life. Don't allow things to boil down to a single relationship. Just look at all the variety around you, the social variety around you, and, you know, try your best to benefit from it. Because I really do think, you know, your friends, your associates, they're all a resource. And with that moon Jupiter trine, I think you can actually take advantage of that resource. You know, not just today, maybe tomorrow as well. Virgo, you are fairly ambitious at the moment. I mean, I think in some ways, Virgo, you have been ambitious in your own way since the end of May, when Jupiter moved into Gemini. I mean, I think that was quite a big movement. Jupiter moving into Gemini. You know, Gemini is an angular sign from Virgo, from a Virgo view, and with Jupiter in Gemini, you know, you have high expectations of yourself and of other people, and there are things you want to achieve. And today we've got the moon making a trine to Jupiter, and so with the moon trine Jupiter, you are very focused on what you want and also getting rewarded. Rewards are important, and it's possible that you evaluate recognition in a financial sense. So how much, for example, are you appreciated, particularly if you're working? You might regard appreciation in terms of cents and dollars, or as they used to say in the UK, pounds, shillings and pence. You might put a price tag on that recognition, and the financial side just could be very important to you. Now, I understand that you've got to be paid, and that matters, but it's not just about money. You can't put a price tag on everything. And, you know, this is because, you know, the moon is making a conjunction of the south node. Certain tendency here, Virgo, for you to just put too much emphasis on the financial side of things, even the exact side of things. You know, looking at not just the broad number, how many dollars, how many pounds, but the precise number. The financial details could matter so much that they actually prevent you from getting where you want to go. And so there's a little bit of a contrast there. You've got to think about your ambitions and where you want to go, but if you focus too much on the money, that might actually hold you back. So I'm just recommending that you don't get too caught up in material details, because that could spoil what actually could be quite a powerful day. And it's a day when you can organize things very effectively, and if you've got a vision about the way you want to organize yourself and your work and your money, you can bring it all together. But just don't be over detailed, and don't get too focused on, for example, the profit and loss columns in a spreadsheet, that can come later. What matters is that things are working in a general sense. If things are working, if things are moving, if you're able to get your message across, that's great. That's perhaps all you need for the moment. And Virgo, it's also important that you are optimistic. Yeah. People want optimism right now. People want to be told that of all the possibilities, the best possibility can be the one that actually happens. Now, you might have your doubts about that. That's reasonable. Virgos always ask questions, but maybe today you should shelve your doubts and just focus on the absolute best result that can possibly happen if everything goes right. Because really, that's what people want to hear. Though finally, I should say, Virgo, that from a heliocentric view, Mercury is still making a square to Pluto. And that square to Pluto might actually be useful. It's an aspect that is about manipulation and having an influence. I must remember it's a heliocentric aspect. Don't think don't look at what's going on geocentrically and say, well, there's no square between Mercury and Pluto. There is a square between Mercury and Pluto from a heliocentric view. So that Mercury square Pluto can make you quite influential, and you can perhaps use the facts to make your case, and your handling of the facts. Okay, it might be your distortion of the facts as well, but there's no need to distort the facts. But the way you present your facts can be very compelling, and people are going to listen to you. And yeah, if you need to make people worried, sure, you can make people worried, and that will all help in terms of the way you express yourself and have a real influence. Libra. The moon is moving into your sign, and that's got to be good news. More good news is the fact that the moon is starting to make an aspect to Jupiter, making a trine aspect to Jupiter. Indeed, it's also making a trine aspect to Pluto. So that gives us a bit of a grand trine. So grand trine, in air, so that means we got moon trine Pluto, moon trine Jupiter. Jupiter kind of trine Pluto, but it is a bit wide. But I do think there is a grand trine feel about what's happening today. And I think, Libra, that is something very much to be welcomed. Things are moving. And recently things perhaps have not been moving. With the moon in Virgo, things may have been a bit slow, and you may have felt that it really wasn't time to fully assert yourself, that you had to hold back. But now, moon's in Libra, you can be yourself, and I think that you're going to be luckier than average. I mean, that has to be the case, doesn't it? Because the moon is trine Jupiter. It's a very fortunate aspect, moon trine Jupiter, and it's just going to build up. It may continue into tomorrow, especially if you're in Australia or New Zealand, East Asia. But there's still a trine feel to it. Today, tomorrow, things are moving, and you don't have to be satisfied with what's in front of you. So you might feel that everything's there, everything in place. If you've got it, you've got it. If you haven't got it, well, too bad. No, you can always get more. And I'm thinking particularly in terms of ideas. You haven't got every single idea that's possible. There are new ideas that you should be looking for. And I think with that moon trine Jupiter, you can definitely get into those ideas. Those ideas are going to be available. It may come through other people. It may come through your reading or your research, or it just could come from just sheer insight. Just getting a feeling, comes from nowhere, just hits you. And everything is made clear. So possibly, Libra, it's a good idea not to have absolutely fixed plans today. Always make room for a change, and that change may just come from nowhere. Just you having an idea, you being told something, you realizing something you hadn't realized before. And so that's really going to help move things. And the moon is also on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. And so with moon on a Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, that is about making things better, just not being satisfied with second best. Things could always be better. And I do mean that positively. Do push yourself a bit, but you don't have to torture yourself, feeling that you've got to really struggle to make things happen. You don't have to struggle. You just have to be enthusiastic and give everything your best shot, and that should be enough. Now, I'm not saying though that you have to be. You can just be light-hearted and relaxed, and there is a seriousness to the day, but don't be overwhelmed by this seriousness. And that seriousness is encapsulated in the fact that we do have an opposition between Venus and Pluto. So Venus is your ruler. It's in early Leo, and it's making an opposition to Pluto. So this Venus opposition Pluto perhaps makes you aware of the power equation. Yes, you're aware of your own power, and you want to be powerful. Venus is in Leo, after all. But you also be aware of things that could hold you back, and things that might restrict your freedom. And that might become a little bit obsessive. But maybe you need to actually analyze it and ask, what appears to be restricting you. And it may be the case that the power struggle is not actually going on between you and other people. It may be a struggle that's going on between you and you, between different aspects of yourself. And I don't mean this in some kind of schizoid way. In fact, I mean this in quite a positive way. So what I'm talking about here is about you feeling or wanting to feel that everything is okay, that you've got everything sorted out, that you want to feel comfortable. And then there's a struggle between that feeling and another feeling saying, this isn't good enough. You haven't given it everything you've got. So there's this other, I won't say entity, I'm talking about a side of your personality, but it's quite a tough side of your personality, and a side of your personality that wants the best for you, that is saying, this isn't quite good enough. This is not a time to be comfortable. There's more that you need to do. And so the easygoing side of yourself, perhaps represented by Venus and Leo, says, no, I don't want to do that. I'm quite comfortable. But you can't be comfortable, not entirely comfortable, if there's something telling you it's not good enough. So I think you need to listen to yourself and listen to the promptings of yourself, that just nagging feeling that you haven't done as good enough a job as you could have done. Sure, things are good. Moon is trine Jupiter. Yeah, it's easy to make things happen, but it shouldn't be entirely easy. There needs to be a little bit of a struggle. And you need to ask yourself some questions. Where have you been lazy? Where have you just ignored something? Because something, I think, has been ignored, and you're being told at an unconscious level that you have ignored it. And so, Libra, work it out. Okay, you don't have to work it out, I suppose. Maybe it's not appropriate, but it is just a possibility. And on a different note, I don't want to get too serious because I think it is a good day. I think it's a really good day. It's just important that you make it as good a day as possible, as constructive a day as possible. There is a trine aspect between Venus and Mars. Now, this is a heliocentric trine between Venus and Mars, not a geocentric trine. From a geocentric point of view, there is no way there's a Venus trine Mars in the sky. But from a heliocentric point of view, there is a trine between Venus and Mars, where you put the sun in the center of the solar system where it should be. And I think that Venus trine Mars is going to give you a lot of power and assertiveness, and yeah, you can have an influence. And if things are not entirely the way they should be, it's okay to complain. It's okay to not complain, maybe, but to make a fuss, or to just tell people, this isn't quite good enough. I think we should move a bit further on this. So you don't have to be satisfied. I know as a Libran, you like to be satisfied. You want everyone to be happy, but you don't have to be satisfied for the sake of it, just to keep the peace. If you feel that something isn't quite good enough, that Venus trine Mars does allow you to push things further. In the end, you will be appreciated and respected for taking a stand. Scorpio. Scorpio, I've just been talking about Venus trine Mars when I was talking to Libra. And this Venus trine Mars, remember, it's a heliocentric Venus trine Mars. It's not a geocentric Venus trine Mars. And you're a Scorpio. Mars rules Scorpio. So I think there is good reason to believe that you may be impacted by this heliocentric trine between Venus and Mars. And I think that this Venus trine Mars is going to be very helpful. It's going to make you, I think, quite charismatic. It's going to allow you to get attention, even if you don't really feel that you want attention. You know, you feel that it's not appropriate, it's not the right time. I understand that. You know, you might feel you've done enough, but you know, you've got to make the most of everything that's on offer, surely. So, and one thing that's on offer is this heliocentric Venus trine Mars. It's about you perhaps getting on with people, but of course I suppose this Venus trine Mars isn't necessarily just about your social life. It can be about what you're trying to create beautiful things, for example, or just perhaps focusing on your appearance. Could be money. Venus can relate to money, but whatever it is, that Venus trine Mars really does allow you to get things together, and I think it allows you to have an influence, to get noticed. But if you don't want to get noticed, then you can beautify your surroundings, and at the same time pay a little bit of attention to your finances, work out what's going on, make sure everything's in order. So yeah, do take advantage of that Venus trine Mars. Also, you have to be aware that Venus is, from a geocentric point of view, has just edged into Leo, and I talked about that yesterday. The fact that Venus in Leo can relate to how you perceive yourself. It can be about a little bit of vanity, as I said yesterday, but I don't mean vanity and being vain in a derogatory sense. Just it's that looking in the mirror feel to it. Venus moving into Leo, and it's making an opposition to Pluto. So with Venus opposition Pluto, there may be certain things that you're becoming a little bit obsessed and concerned about. An obsession that you may not feel is right, but it's there anyway. For example, you may be obsessed with what you look like. But I don't mean that in a pathological sense. It's fine. And there just may be a challenge there to come over maybe physically in exactly the right way. And there may be a sense of perfection. Though don't allow yourself to be undermined by members of your family, people who know you very well. You do want to present yourself in the right way, even though another part of you kind of feels that you don't really want too much attention, but it still matters, and so you're a bit conflicted there. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be undermined by pressure from people close to you to look like a particular image. You don't have to be someone else's image. I mean, that's obvious, but there's a certain danger that you perceive, or at least you perceive, pressure to come over in a particular way, to maybe appear in a particular way, dress in a particular way. That pressure could be there, and I think that pressure perhaps needs to be managed. And that is perhaps the nature of this Venus opposition Pluto. Venus opposition Pluto may also tell you something about other people. Perhaps the people close to you. Venus does rule Taurus, which is your opposite sign, and it seems that some people may be a little bit obsessive. More obsessive than usual, and perhaps more concerned about power than usual. And there may be some effort to control you. I don't think it's going to work, but I think you might be aware of that. And at the same time, watch out for jealousy. I think that some people are jealous, and they're concealing quite strong feelings, and I think that you just have to be aware of that. And is that jealousy going to be such that it becomes possessive? It could be. People can be possessive, and you shouldn't be surprised by people's possessiveness. And I don't think that you should be heavily critical of someone just because they're possessive. People are possessive, or everyone's possessive, but just possessiveness might become a particularly strong feature of some of the people you know today. Again, it goes back to that Venus opposition Pluto. But overall, I think you can deal with it, because, as I said, there is a heliocentric Venus trine Mars. Tune into that Venus trine Mars. You can gently control everything. So, yeah, it'll be okay. Sagittarius. You feel that you can be taken seriously, but people will listen to you, that people will understand you. So, there's no real need to hold back. And I think that you will benefit from the moon moving into Libra. Because from a Sagittarian perspective, Libra is a very sociable sign. So you could say moon moving into Libra is a time when Sagittarians are perhaps going to want to up their social life, be in contact with as many new people as possible, especially as the moon is not just in Libra, but it's trine Jupiter. And, Jupiter is your ruler, and Jupiter is in Gemini, your opposite sign. So with moon trine Jupiter, there's plenty on offer. There's absolutely no reason to be bored today. There are plenty of things to do, plenty of people to meet, and so on the surface that seems fine. But I think you have to be careful that you don't get drawn into any particular social situation in a sort of totally exclusive way. If you focused all your energy on one person or one crowd of people, that would not be helpful. I think that you could waste a lot of energy, and I think also you might be fundamentally conflicted there. And the conflict there is that you as a Sagittarian are supposed to be a free spirit. I mean, that really matters if you're a Sagittarian. But if you spend too much, if you throw too much energy into one aspect of your social life, it might sound fun, but in the end, your freedom may be curtailed. And if you're a Sagittarian, freedom is everything. It really matters. And it's the freedom to do what you want, and it's the freedom to be creative in your own way, and not having to constantly worry what other people are telling you to do, trying to fit to other people's tastes and preferences. That's not what it's about. So don't allow your social life or your social activities to get out of hand. Sure, you can benefit from them, but I think it's just perhaps important to just move around and to realize that the social universe is large, and you don't have to restrict yourself to any one particular place or scene. So that is something, Sagittarius, that I do think you need to consider. And also, Sagittarius, I think there's some danger that you allow your boundaries to get somewhat perforated. Especially when you're with people. Doesn't matter where they are. As soon as you're with people, and particularly if you, it kind of supports what I've already been saying, but when you're with people in one particular scene, your boundaries are constantly being challenged, and you might not even know that your boundaries are being challenged. And before you know it, you might become part of the scenery. You become part of the scenery, but you become part of someone else's scenery, and you're stuck, and you're not doing anything useful. So that, I think, is a danger that you have to be really very, very aware of. And so don't get caught. But I don't think there's any need for you to get caught. And what you're main focus should be on today, I think, is just improving yourself. And you can't improve yourself by being in one place. You can only improve yourself at the moment by giving yourself plenty of variety. You have to be kind of like maybe like some sort of bee or a bumblebee. It's like trying to take a photograph of a bumblebee. You think a bumblebee is an easy thing to take a photograph of. You take a photograph of it just to show that, hey, there are some bumblebees still around. I know we've got this environmental destruction, but it just keeps moving. It doesn't hang around. And so perhaps that's how you have to be. You have to be like a bumblebee, or maybe just a regular bee, just moving from flower to flower, not staying in one place for longer than you have to be. Just keep moving. Or I suppose in Washington State, you see a load of hummingbirds. Be like a hummingbird. You don't spend too much time in one place. You just keep moving, keep sampling. And that is how you find improvement. You do not find self-improvement by just staying in one place. That would be bad news. Capricorn, you are in a position where you feel that you have to make an impact. You can't just move on as if nothing is going on. You have to make an impact, and I think that you want to be noticed, and it's absolutely okay to want to be noticed. And your particular way of doing things is really much in demand, and you're helped by the fact that there is this kind of grand trine in air. It's a somewhat wide grand trine, but we've got the moon in Libra, trine Jupiter in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius, and it's that moon in Libra which is really at the apex of the grand trine. The moon is, moving into Libra, and Libra is an important sign if you're a Capricorn. It's the sign which is at the apex of the chart. And so with moon in Libra, you really want to have an impact, and I think you also kind of want to be successful, and you want to make your mark, and that's great. But you need to do it in the right way. You have to do it according to your rules. And what you mustn't do is get yourself into a situation where you feel that in order to make an impression, you have to make a real effort to understand what other people want. Because in a way, that's a contradiction. If you are trying too much to give people what they want, then you're really having no impact at all. You might as well not be there. So if you're going to have an impact today, that impact has to come from you. It's what you think is important. And you have deep feelings, deep insights, and perhaps you feel that these insights need to be kept to yourself. Maybe you're quite protective about your insights, but you can be too protective. I mean, the trouble about keeping things secret, or really secret, is that if you're not careful, you could keep these things secret forever, and one day you might not be around anymore, decades and decades into the future, hopefully. But still, there is, if you have something that's important, then you must be prepared to offer it, and you must be prepared to reveal it. So that goes back to what I was saying about you having an impact. It's got to come from you. And you shouldn't be worried about rocking the boat, suggesting things that other people don't want to hear. It's something very individual to you, and you as an individual have something important to contribute to the collective. But as I said, it's got to be you. And with the moon trine Jupiter, I think that things should be really easy. You might think you're going to get opposition, but I don't think you will. And it's not just moon trine Jupiter, it's moon trine Pluto. It will all run, I think, very smoothly. And I don't think you're even going to have to make a scene. I think in terms of the way you express yourself, you can do it in a way that is quite objective. It doesn't seem as if there's any urgency or obsession or anger. You just objectively express things the way you see it, and people just listen. And I think the reason they listen to you is because you appear to be objective. It appears that you're not emotionally committed. Now, you might be emotionally committed, but your lack of emotional commitment actually makes you more powerful. So really, Capricorn, you can make things happen, and it can be on your terms. You don't have to do things on other people's terms. It's unnecessary. And at the same time, you can do things very gently. You can gently do things on your terms without really anyone knowing what's going on. So do tune into your power, but it's just important that your power is not compromised. Now, another thing going on is that there is an opposition aspect between Venus and Pluto. And this Venus-Pluto opposition is running across the finance axis of your chart. And Venus anyway has a connection with money. And so with Venus opposition Pluto, it may be that you actually have quite a deep concern about money, and money is important, and it may be not just important to you, it may be important to others. You scratch the surface, there's always a financial dimension, even if you're dealing with something that appears to be non-financial, but money is still under the surface. And I suppose with Venus opposition Pluto, you need to kind of understand what the financial angle is. So in all your meetings and associations and your activities today, always ask yourself, what is the financial angle? Because there seems to be a financial angle. And if you can be honest, certainly with yourself, about that financial angle right from the beginning, I do think it's going to make things a lot easier. Aquarius, Venus opposition Pluto. It's today, and that Venus opposition Pluto does matter for you because it's across the main axis of your chart. So let's consider what that is about. Pluto is in Aquarius. It will actually leave Aquarius briefly. I don't know, sometimes in September, quite soon. Then it does go back into Aquarius. It does temporarily go into Capricorn. But with Venus opposition Pluto, so Pluto is you. And because it's in Aquarius, it's you, and it's your power, and it's your control, and I think you really do want to be in control. And Venus is opposition at Pluto. So what does that Venus actually mean? I think it's important, Aquarius, that you have some understanding of the way you occur to other people, particularly if these people are important to you. Now, with Pluto in Aquarius, you do have a sense of your own power and a sense of, perhaps being in control. And it's a growing sense that you are in control with Pluto moving through your sign. But how does it relate to other people? Venus in Leo, I think, perhaps does represent another person, but I think it represents another person who, in their own way, is a little bit fragile and needs to be supported. And it's possible that Pluto in Aquarius kind of undermines Venus. So there may be something about you which is actually a little bit overwhelming, and there may be people out there who just feel that you're not taking them seriously enough, that you're not really understanding people as real people. Maybe you're just objectifying them. You're just perhaps seeing people in terms of their function in your life. I know you're not like that, but it's just so easy to do, isn't it? To just place oneself in the center of the universe and just see everyone else as just actors in our personal drama. That's not something you should do, but it's easy to do that. And so you do have to make a special effort to understand people as being real, as real, independent actors, not even actors, living personalities. And so show people respect. Make a special effort to show people respect, even if they're strangers, people you've never met before. You're only going to meet them for 5 seconds, but still go through today treating everyone with respect, treating everyone as if they are special. It will be appreciated. And just remember that everyone else out there believes that they are the center of the universe. And so you, from their perspective, you're just an actor in their drama. So I know it's an obvious point, but I think today, Aquarius, I think it's a point that does have to be made. I think that is really very important. And at the same time, Aquarius, we do have the moon making a trine to Pluto, and it's in an air sign. There is an air grand trine, moon trine Pluto, moon's trine Jupiter, and you are an air sign. So I think that air energy can benefit you. There's a strong breeze today, and that might be a strong breeze in terms of ideas. Ideas are just flowing. If you can be open to them, forget the fact that you've got Pluto. Pluto in Aquarius can just make you a little bit stubborn. You might feel you've got all the answers, but the breeze, the strong breeze is blowing new ideas your way. Perhaps you can conceive them as sort of leaves or little bits of paper with an idea written on them. These ideas are all over the place, and you need to pick up on them. Gathering, you can't pick up on every single idea in the universe, but there are ways in which you can improve your understanding of what is going on. So take advantage of everything coming your way, and treat other people with respect, and treat other people as real individuals. And then, Aquarius, I think you should have a very constructive day, and at the same time you can have a fortunate impact on others. It can work both ways. If you disrespect people, you treat them as objects, then of course you're having a really bad impact. But if you treat people with total respect as real live individuals, you can make a big difference, and that's certainly the right thing to do. Pisces, you are probably working on a fairly hidden level today, I think, in most cases. I don't think that there's any great need to be out and about, being noticed. I don't think that's really necessary at all. I think that you've got your own world, and I think your own world is pretty well sorted out, and within your own world things are certainly moving, and your feelings are quite strong, but don't allow your feelings to trip you up. Some danger there. It's just possible that you may take something, put a lot of emotional energy into it, and then it all starts moving in the wrong direction. Perhaps you're just being over emotional, taking things over seriously, and you take something which is actually quite straightforward and you turn it into something so complicated that it kind of loses all reality. So do keep it simple. And this applies not just to emotions, but it also applies to money. Money matters, of course. Money always matters. So try to look at things from the absolute simplest view. So if you're dealing with a financial issue, then just go for the obvious solution. Try out the obvious solution first, because the obvious solution is probably the solution that works best. And you perhaps have to think about reaction time. So if you're presented with something, there's perhaps two things going on. The first thing that goes on is you reach a conclusion immediately. You decide this is what it's all about. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is you start to analyze the solution, and you start to feel it and think it through, and you try to work out all the possibilities, and that just goes on and on and on. And you come to a second conclusion, which may be different from your first conclusion. But I think in this situation, I think your first conclusion, the obvious conclusion, is probably the correct conclusion. So if you spend a long time analyzing everything, especially if you're trying to consider all these competing social pressures and what this person thinks and what that person is doing, if you try to spend a long time analyzing something, I think that you could end up reaching entirely the wrong conclusion, and you could just end up getting things wrong. So perhaps it's just a question of trusting your immediate intuition, your immediate conclusion, your ability to quickly make up your mind. Not in all cases, but I think that that's likely to be the best way of handling things. Though I'm not saying it's a bad day, not at all. Jupiter is your ruler, and the moon is trine Jupiter. The moon trine Jupiter is one of the better aspects, and with moon trine Jupiter, things are running smoothly. And I think that if you have felt recently that you're perhaps not quite good enough, that you're perhaps not quite up to scratch, I think that moon trine Jupiter is actually going to remind you that you really do have what it takes, especially as the moon is not just trine Jupiter, it's also trine Pluto. And so, the moon is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, and so that gives you a great sense of what you can do, but just don't overcomplicate it. The moon trine Jupiter should be providing you with straightforward solutions which can be acted out quickly. So if you feel you're not good enough, or you feel you've got something wrong, that there needs to be some fine-tuning, you'll see what you can do, and you'll understand what you can do, and you'll realize that it can be done really very quickly, and that you just don't have to make things too complicated. And I think that is the secret for getting through the day. And Pisces, that is it. And I am now going to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was number 37, the family. And yeah, this hexagram is locked. There are no moving lines. And the family is a hexagram which is really about an existing structure. Just remember that the I Ching is a Confucian oracle, and it kind of sees the family as being a microcosm of the state. So you have a state which is well organized with defined hierarchies, and likewise the family is the same. So that's how you kind of run the state. And in the family, people have their roles, and the roles are often quite traditional. And it's just important today that we understand our role, and we stay with it, and we execute it, and we don't feel that we don't feel that we need to have airs and graces. We don't go beyond that role, and then everything is fine. And of course, the family may literally be about the family, or it could be about a close-knit group of friends, or it might be people at work, just a group who have a defined purpose with a defined hierarchy. And it's just about respecting that hierarchy. And there is a leader. And in this case, the leader seems to be benign, and the leader seems to be trustworthy, and we can basically look up to that leader. Of course, that leader might be us. It depends on whatever hierarchy we're involved in. It is about hierarchy today, and whatever you're doing, that's what it's about. It's a very hierarchical day, and it's not trying to go beyond our place. So it's not a time to be rebellious. It's not really a time to take the initiative, unless it's our job to take the initiative. So if you're used to taking initiative, if you're expected to take the initiative, and that's what the group around you, whether it's a family or the clan or whatever, then that's what you have to do. But if your job is to support, and I think that in many cases that is our job, it's to play a supporting role without necessarily getting much attention or appreciation. But if we can do that, then that is the right thing to do. And we do have to consider what the nuclear hexagram is. This is a hexagram underneath the family. You can get that by knocking off the top and bottom line of the hexagram. So we make the third, fourth, and fifth lines the top trigram, and the second, third, and fourth lines the bottom trigram. So the nuclear hexagram of the family is before completion. And so this may be a hint about what it's actually all about. So before completion is a situation where we haven't finished doing something, where we are perhaps still crossing the great river. We haven't reached the bank, crossing the great water. We haven't quite reached the other side, and so we're in this sort of intermediate state, and that's the broad picture. So now we can start to get a better idea about what the family might actually be about. So the family might be a situation where, in a broad sense, you're not just about today, but what we're trying to achieve, or what our group is trying to achieve. We're trying to move from one place to another, and we haven't quite made it. There's no panic, but we're not there yet. And so how are we going to get there? How are we going to get to our destination? And in order to get to our destination, we have to have a strong sense of hierarchical cohesion and unity. If the hierarchy stays in place, if everyone knows their role and acts that role out, then things can move to the other side. It's a bit like, I was reading about fire ants recently, and I know that fire ants might not seem immediately appropriate to the family. You don't want to have fire ants in your house, but apparently fire ants, when they fall in the water and when they're on a river, they form this bond, and they can somehow, as a group, they can sort of navigate their way across water. I don't know quite how they do it, but they can adjust the shape of this raft of living fire ants, and so as a family, as a group, they can get across. And so I suppose in terms of the family, it may be a similar situation. We are perhaps part of a living raft trying to cross the great water, get to the other side. And that means that every component part of that raft, this living raft, needs to understand its role in the hierarchy. It's not a time to be an individual. It's not a time to decide that you want to do something else, to decide you want to completely change. I don't know, what was that film? It was like, what was that film? Rudolph the Reindeer. That was this sort of 1960s Christmassy film where this elf decides that it wants to be a dentist. It's not a time to decide you want to be a dentist. It's not. You just have to be in you have to be in the hierarchy. Do what's expected of you. It may not be very elevating. You might feel your individuality is being crushed, but not really crushed. But just, we all need to do our role, to do our bit, and then we can get to the other side. But fundamentally, this hexagram, the family, it doesn't move, and so perhaps not a great deal of excitement, but perhaps also not a great deal of drama. Just understand our role, execute that role, and we'll be fine. And I now want to consider Venus opposition Pluto. I have already looked at Venus opposition Pluto when I was looking at the forecast for the week ahead. But now I want to look at Venus opposition Pluto, not so much from a perspective of the individual chart, but from a perspective of what does it mean in terms of events. What kind of events does Venus opposition Pluto attract? And I suppose, looking at what was going on in the UK, this event where someone killed 3 members of a family with a crossbow because of some relationship that broke up. That struck me as a very Venus opposition Pluto event. So, and this happened in this place just north of London called Bushey, which is, Bushey is a very staid, as far as I understand it, nothing much happens in Bushy. It's sort of respectable place. You don't associate that with great drama. It's not anywhere poor or deprived. And I suppose part of the reason this story got a lot of attention is because it was the wife and two daughters of a BBC journalist, so that gets extra attention. So I think that this has really affected the UK. It's the main news story at the moment in UK. So yeah, this man goes in, he has a crossbow, he ties up these women and he kills them with his crossbow. At least that's my understanding of it. I suppose it's very likely that as a result of this event that crossbows will be banned. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. This is what happens. There was when was it in the 1990s? There was Britain had a sort of Sandy Hook event where I think it was Dunblane and after in Scotland where a lot of children were killed, and I think handguns got banned. So people act very quickly. I think in Australia there was a similar event of mass killing in which very quickly guns got banned or handguns got banned and so forth. Of course, America, it's completely different. But, I would have thought that that's what's going to happen. Now, let's just look at this chart. And I'm not saying I'm going to make any sense of this chart, by the way. I don't have any other details, but I just thought if it's just happened, I thought I would look at it. So here is the chart. So I make it, but it happened on July the 9th, which is let's say I think it happened at around 6:30 p.m. and in Bushy in England. So as far as the Venus opposition Pluto is concerned, the Venus opposition Pluto is not immediately apparent here because it's dissociate. So there's Venus, it's opposition Pluto, but it's in different signs. It's not even an exact aspect. But I'm thinking that maybe in the build up to this Venus opposition Pluto, this is what happened. I mean, that's possible. I mean, but it is a very Venus Pluto event. Jealousy, possessiveness, and just completely losing it. But at the same time, Venus opposition Pluto, a carefully planned event. It wasn't out of mass rage. It was systematically, the killings were sort of systematically conducted. And Jupiter appears to have been probably on a descendant there. So that may say something. A south node on the midheaven. But it could be nothing to do with Venus opposition Pluto. It could just be the fact that we're now seeing Uranus moving on to Algol. And, with Uranus on Algol getting closer and closer to Algol, perhaps we can expect these kind of events. Over the next couple of weeks, we're reminded that we're living in a somewhat unstable world, and that there's also with Algol there's a sense of horror, the Medusa, and so the horror is going to be presented to us. And I suppose, from a UK perspective, this seems to be quite a horrific event. Now, the only thing that makes this chart personal, I mean personal in terms of the ascendant and the midheaven, that really brings it down to earth, is the fact that you have got Mercury is on the ascendant midheaven midpoint. I think you can see that, the midheaven directly, it's on the midheaven IC midpoint. So there's Mercury, and you can see that you've got Jupiter on the IC, and you've got the South Node on the midheaven. So you can see that you've got an angular Jupiter, and you've got an angular South Node, and you've got Mercury in the middle. So that might be perhaps how it's working. But still, I wouldn't have said that Mercury was particularly horrific. It's just Mercury in Leo. I suppose you could say it's someone's wounded pride. You might also say, well, if you take that as a chart and you try to identify with different people in that chart, you could say, well, the person causing the damage, doing the killing, you could say, well, that's Gemini on the 7th house cusp. The ruler of Gemini is Mercury, and Mercury is on the ascendant midheaven midpoint, on the Jupiter South Node midpoint, on the midheaven descendant midpoint, and that's what you could see. I mean, I tried to look at other stuff, but it didn't. The chart was not actually particularly impressive. Yeah, there was a Venus-Pluto opposition, and I just thought I have to mention this chart simply because I'm talking about Venus-Pluto oppositions, and that's what is happening, and we're going to get more Venus-Pluto opposition events, all the time. Next week we've got the Republican National Convention, where I think that Donald Trump is going to make his pick of his vice presidential pick. So here's the start, the first day of a Republican National Convention, and again we can see that. I by the way, don't worry about the time. I've no idea what time it starts, but it's happening at the time of Venus opposition Pluto. It is about power. I suppose in this case it's about Donald Trump's power, and one does wonder who his pick is going to be. And of course, by the time of July the 15th, we're going to have that conjunction between Mars and Uranus. That Mars and Uranus conjunction is going to be exact. So it will be interesting to watch the Republican National Convention and to ask ourselves, to what extent is Venus opposition Pluto working? Okay, so let me now be more specific about Venus opposition Pluto, to look at events which happened where we saw this. Martin Luther King was assassinated when with Venus opposition Pluto. So here's a chart of Martin Luther King's assassination. I think it happened at 6:05 p.m. in Memphis, Tennessee. There's a Sun-Saturn conjunction very close to the descendant, and there is our Venus opposition Pluto. It's not exact, but it's conjunct Mercury. So in this case, with Martin Luther King's assassination, when you're trying to understand Venus opposition Pluto, you have to look at the surrounding planets and what was actually happening. And I think that in the late 60s you had a conjunction between Uranus and Pluto. So there's a Uranus Pluto conjunction. Okay, it was not exact, 6 degrees off, but Venus was still making that opposition to Pluto, opposition to Uranus, and Mercury was exactly opposition Uranus. So Mercury opposition Uranus is the news. I suppose Venus conjunct Mercury, you could say, well, maybe that's someone communicating. Was he? I don't know. I suppose in Pisces, and yeah, Venus opposition Uranus and Mercury opposition Uranus. So what was happening is that Venus opposition Pluto is just because it was part of something collective, and it was the fact that we were seeing a manifestation of that Uranus-Pluto conjunction, which was perhaps so destabilizing in the late 60s. So that's how it worked. That's how it was making itself felt. And Venus was also trine Neptune, so you had this outer planet configuration, Uranus sextile Neptune, Pluto involved, and Venus hitting it. So that's one manifestation of Venus opposition Pluto. And yeah, I don't know if we can really look at Venus opposition Pluto in isolation. Venus opposition Pluto can be, I suppose, about violence. We often see Venus as being a planet of love and the planet of relationships. And I sometimes think that we've misunderstood Venus, that we haven't got Venus in its entirety. And, there is a view that Venus is a planet of war. I mean, I think that in some societies, Venus was seen as a planet of war, and you can see that you've got this the concept of Venus as this female principle of is it Nike, or you could see the principle of Victoria. Victoria is the feminization of the concept of victory. And so that could be how we see Venus. And, one of the probably the most devastating event in British history, recent British history, Britain's national humiliation, was the fall of Singapore, when, Singapore was this British colony and the Japanese attacked it, and in fact the British had outnumbered the Japanese, yet the British still surrendered. And so the fall of Singapore was Britain's day of infamy, and of course it happened shortly after Pearl Harbor, and I don't think that the British Empire quite recovered from the fall of Singapore. And the fall of Singapore happened when you had Venus opposition Pluto. I don't know the exact time when it fell, but it's gone for February the 15th, 1942. But there is Venus opposition Pluto. So wasn't Britain's victory, it was Japan's victory, wasn't it? And at the same time, Uranus was conjunct Algol. So I do feel that there are sort of echoes in a way right now between now and the fall of Singapore, in terms of national humiliation, something that Britain never really got over. The empire was shown to be a paper tiger with the surrender of Singapore. Particularly as some would say it didn't have to happen. I don't know. Maybe Singapore could have held out. Historians have these big arguments about whether Britain could have held out. But I don't think Britain quite recovered from that. And so Uranus was conjunct Algol. Uranus is now still conjunct Algol, so there are perhaps echoes. I mean, I suppose if you are in Britain and you're of a sort of a right-wing persuasion, I don't know, would you regard Labour winning the election as being similar to the fall of Singapore? I suppose if you take the view that if you're on the right and you take the view that Labour victory is a disaster for the UK, it's the end of Britain, fall of Singapore, that sort of makes sense, but it does depend on your viewpoint, doesn't it? So that's Venus opposition Pluto. Another military event that happened with Venus opposition Pluto was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. Battle of the Bulge took place end of 1944, when it was well after the D-Day landings, when the Allies would sort of were taking Paris had fallen already, and were moving into eastern France, and it was the German counterattack, and the counterattack started on, I think, December the 16th, 1944, and to begin with, it was quite successful. There was an element of deception there with, I think you had German soldiers dressing up as Americans, and they weren't prepared for it, and Americans at first were completely unprepared for it. And there you can see Venus was opposition Pluto. So it was certainly something dramatic, unexpected. There was a certain sense of it was hidden. I think the weather wasn't very good, so the Allies were unable to use air as they had in the past. So there was a certain sense of things being hidden, and so that could be about Venus opposition Pluto. The attack did not last very long. It was a failure, and I suppose as Venus moved towards the opposition of Pluto, that is, I suppose, the battle unfolding. I don't know how relevant that is to Venus opposition Pluto, though. I mean, you might regard it as not as being a particularly Venus-Pluto opposition, but I do just wanted to look at events which have a Venus-Pluto opposition feel to it. Now, Venus-Pluto oppositions can be about relationships, and they can be the results of relationships and the drama that can happen because of relationships. And the abdication of Edward VIII, because he wanted to marry Wallis Simpson, and this is when it was. I think this is when it was announced on December the 10th, 1936, that Edward VIII was abdicating. And there we have that Venus. There we have Venus opposition Pluto, a very close aspect between Venus opposition Pluto. 29 Capricorn plays 28 Cancer. And I suppose you could say this all was because of a marriage, because Edward VIII was obsessed about Wallis Simpson, who, of course, because she was a divorcee, she was not considered to be appropriate, and Edward VIII was generally considered that he could no longer continue as being king. So yes, so Venus opposition Pluto just might indicate just his obsession with Wallis Simpson and the consequences of that obsession. And the abdication crisis has it's a very big event in British history. So I think that certainly has to be mentioned. Now, that Venus-Pluto opposition, it's kind of interesting, because when you see 29 Capricorn, you think, oh, that rings a bell, doesn't it? Well, there's a full moon coming up, isn't there, at 29 Capricorn? I don't know what the relevance it is, but there's a full moon coming up at 29 degrees 9, July the 21st. The full moon, will it be exactly on the Venus-Pluto opposition at the time of the abdication crisis, of the time of the abdication? I'm not saying anyone's going to abdicate, but I think that is relevant, and I will be talking about it more with relevance to the British royal family. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that it's just okay. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I was going to mention it elsewhere, but I'll tell you what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is this. Here, let me show you what I mean here. Here is Prince George's chart. Now, I have said Now, he's the son of William and Catherine. So here's Prince George's chart. And, I've said on numerous occasions that I do not believe that Prince George is a suitable monarch. But I don't know. I mean, I've said this, people disagreed with me. There's just no way. With his chart, I'm not going to go into details about his chart at the moment. I know I'm distracted from Venus opposition Pluto, but I don't think it's right. There's no positive planets. I think he's got this Sun Moon conjunction. Yeah, Sun Moon opposition, full moon. There's his full moon at 29 Cancer and 28 Capricorn. So if we compare Prince George's chart with the chart of the abdication, you see what I mean. The Venus Pluto, there's Venus Pluto. The Venus Pluto opposition at the time of the abdication is right on George's full moon, Prince George's full moon, and I just feel that at some stage Prince George will just say he doesn't want to be king, and I think there is a link perhaps to 1936, but is he going to wait until he's king? Of course, I'll be dead by that time, but are we going to wait? Or is he just going to announce it at an earlier stage? Maybe the full moon. I mean, I know he's young, but still, he's going to turn 11 on July the... He's going to turn 11 on... When does he turn 11? On July the 21st. And of course, he's on July the 22nd, but there's a full moon on that. And maybe just that full moon, as he turns 11, maybe he'll start to recognise that he doesn't really want to be king. I mean, it's just a possibility, particularly as it links with the abdication crisis. Anyway, that is just an idea. So another dramatic event, or really unpleasant event, which took place with Venus opposition Pluto, was the attack on Halabja by a sort of chemical Ali, as he became known as Chemical Ali, when the Iraqis dropped, I think, nerve gas, all sorts of other gases, I think, as well, when they dropped nerve gas on the town of Halabja in Iraq. And so at the time of this attack, there was a Venus-Pluto opposition. So there's something treacherous about Venus opposition Pluto. And remember, Venus may be about war. I just think there's a connection between Venus and warfare. And so look at Neptune. Neptune was trine Venus. Neptune is, of course, a universal significator of gas. So you have the Neptune-Pluto sextile, and then you had Venus opposition the Pluto and Venus trine Neptune. So that may help us sort of understand what actually was going on. If this was true 11 a.m., you would of course have had Uranus quite close to the descendant. But I don't know about. I mean, I tried to work out the precise time of when the gas was dropped, but I had 11 a.m. But certainly the Venus-Pluto opposition seems to tell us quite a lot. Then there is another very dramatic event in 20th century history, which is Hitler coming to power. So January the 30th, 1933, I think Hitler became Chancellor at around 11 a.m. And at 11 a.m., assuming that time is right, we have Venus opposition Pluto. Venus is on the midheaven. So you could say, well, there's a sense of someone's victory. If Venus is a planet of victory, somehow this man has finally succeeded in taking over Germany. And look at Uranus. There was a Uranus-Pluto square, kind of. It was, in fact, it was applying. So Uranus-Pluto is about massive force being applied, and that that was picked up by Venus, and it was picked up by the midheaven. As I said, assuming it really was 11 o'clock that he was made Chancellor. So Venus, okay, you could actually just see Venus as being a trigger. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe it could have been Mercury, could have been something else, but it was just a trigger to that Uranus-Pluto square. Now, Venus was also making an exact Venus-Mars. There was an exact Venus-Mars trine at the time of Hitler coming to power. So that seems to resonate with the fact that Hitler had a if you look at Hitler's horoscope, you see Hitler had an exact Venus-Mars conjunction, and so he was very sensitive to the Venus-Mars cycle, perhaps having a Venus-Mars conjunction. So it's perhaps was fitting that he was able to become German Chancellor as Venus and Mars were making an exact trine. Finally, I want to look at a Venus-Pluto event, which was really big in the news. So this happened. When would it happen? I think it was it 20 years ago, approximately? It was the Natalee Holloway murder. So this is May the 30th, 2005. So just a reminder that Natalee Holloway was, I think she just left high school, and so she went to the Netherlands, Antilles, or is it Aruba or somewhere, as a sort of high school trip, and she was just leaving, and she just disappeared. And so what happened to her? And very quickly, it was suggested, that this man, what's his name, Joran van der Sloot, was involved in it, and Joran van der Sloot eventually confessed to her murder, and he's currently in prison in Peru because he killed someone else. So at the time of this disappearance of Natalee Holloway, and I think people say that she was roughly murdered around 1:30 a.m. on May the 30th, 2005, my 43rd birthday. I remember that day. I mean, I suppose because it was coming up for my birthday weekend, and so I kind of have certainly memories of it. It was a very hot. It was in Bratislava. It was really hot, and I do certainly remember that day. And Venus opposition Pluto. So there you can see Venus opposition Pluto, and so that perhaps takes us back to this Persephone idea, this Pluto taking a young woman, and her just disappearing, and then of course it turned out that she was dead. So Venus opposition Pluto can be about a disappearance. I don't know whether it was exactly 1:30 a.m. Of course, if it were to be 1:30 a.m. exactly, then of course that would fit perfectly, because Pluto is exactly on the midheaven, Venus is exactly on the IC, and you've got Mars rising. So that's the murder, approximately. And then you've got the horoscope of Joran van der Sloot himself. I don't have a time of birth for him, by the way. So Joran van der Sloot, he was born on August the 6th, 1987. So he was quite young at the time. He was 17 at the time, and if you look at his chart, he has Venus square Pluto. I mean, I looked at his chart very recently. I think I looked at his chart yesterday, did I, or the day before? So his Venus is in a bit of a shocking condition. It's conjunct the Sun. Men with Venus conjunct the Sun can abuse women. That is a possibility. But Venus is square Pluto, so maybe at some level he is receptive to the Venus-Pluto cycle in his chart. So he has Venus-Pluto in his horoscope, and so when Venus is opposition Pluto, he's upset perhaps that he's rejected. Remember the crossbow murder that's been gripping Britain at the moment. There we have Venus opposition Pluto. Not such a close opposition, but for some people we don't have the crossbow murderer's chart. Maybe that will give us more information when we find out his date of birth. But so in this situation, he's rejected, and someone who is rejected and feeling at the time of a Venus square Pluto, he responds. I suppose he's a Leo. So that's his chart, Venus square Pluto. And then if you look at the horoscope of Natalee Holloway, again, I don't have her time of birth, but what is important perhaps about Natalee Holloway's chart is that she doesn't have Venus she doesn't have Venus opposition Pluto, but she has Mars square Pluto. In fact, quite a close Mars square Pluto aspect. And so Mars represents men, her perception of how men might have occurred to her. And so Mars square Pluto, she has a terrible encounter with a Mars-Pluto kind of man, a man who has Venus square Pluto, who kills her on the evening when there is Venus opposition Pluto. Okay, that's it with Venus opposition Pluto. Sorry, my subject matter has at times been a little bit grisly, but I thought I just needed to cover this aspect in as many ways as possible. Although still, always have to remind you that my selection of events is very biased. It's just me, what I find interesting, what I've picked up on, but it may not really be telling us what Venus opposition Pluto is really like, because the sample is not just biased, but it is relatively small. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that video interesting. If you did find that video interesting, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.